Well, good morning, church family. Matthew chapter 21. Let's do Matthew. Let's take a break from Revelation this morning, and let's celebrate Palm Sunday. By the way, happy Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday, Matthew chapter 21. Now, today is Palm Sunday. It's the beginning of what Christians call Passion Week, really the final week of the life of Jesus leading up to his arrest and crucifixion and subsequent resurrection. I hate to spoil things, but he did rise. Okay, so next week, next Sunday, next weekend, Saturday and Sunday, we're going to be celebrating the pivotal event in all of human history, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. But today we have to understand, to set things up for next weekend, today we really have to understand what Jesus was up to at the beginning of Passion Week. Really, what did Jesus do and why did he do it? And what does it mean for us? And so let's read the account from Matthew chapter 21, starting in verse number 1. It says this: Now when they drew near to Jerusalem and came to Bethphage, to the Mount of Olives, then Jesus sent two disciples, saying to them, Go into the village in front of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, you shall say, The Lord needs them, and he will send them at once. And this took place to fulfill what was spoken of by the prophet, saying, Say to the daughter of Zion, Behold, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden. The disciples went and did as Jesus had directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and put on them their cloaks, and he sat on them. Most of the crowd spread their cloaks on the road, and others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. And the crowds that went before him and that followed him were shouting, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. And when he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred up, saying, Who is this? And the crowd said, This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth of Galilee. A whole lot going on here. You know, as Americans, we're not very familiar with monarchies, countries and nations that are ruled by a king. But when a new king ascends the throne, their kingship and their authority, their rule is celebrated by what's called a coronation. A coronation, it's basically an acknowledgement that this is the new king, or this is the new queen, this is the guy, this is the girl, this is the one who is now our leader, our authority, our sovereign. So Coronation Day is the day where the new leader goes public and says, Yes, I am who you say that I am, and everybody accepts it. You get that? And here's why this is so important. There's so many times in the scripture, in Jesus' ministry. So Jesus, a little over 3 years of ministry that led up to Passion Week. And throughout Jesus' 3+ years worth of ministry, he would often do these incredible miracles. He would feed thousands with one little Lunchable. He would raise people from the dead. He would heal lepers. He would do these miraculous things. And right on the heels of doing this incredible, newsworthy, miraculous thing, here's what he would say to the people. He would say, Shh, don't tell anybody. Let's keep this just between you and me. He'd say, I don't want to go public yet. But on this day, on the first day of Passion Week right here, he's not shushing anybody. He's going public, and he's going public publicly. Now, why does he choose to go public now and go public publicly? Why is he doing this? It's because now it's time. Before, it wasn't time. He would often tell people, it's not my time yet. The time hasn't come yet. But now it's time. So basically, he has fulfilled all of his ministry, and now he's got to fulfill his mission, which is to die as a substitutionary sacrifice for the sins of all of humanity. My sin, your sin. He's paying for all the sins of all of mankind, so you don't have to. He's covering all of our sins, so you don't have to. And he's supplying grace and hope and forgiveness and power. And so I want to just unpack this really briefly about what all is going on here. Here's what I want you to notice. I want you to notice that Jesus purposefully orchestrates every single detail of his coronation as the king. So, the first day of what we call Passion Week. Now, we're the ones that gave it that name. Christians over time kind of gave it that name, Passion Week. It's kind of a new term. But I want you to know that on this Sunday, the beginning of the week here, what we call Passion Week, the very first one, it was actually Passover week there in Jerusalem. Passover week, it's the annual festival where all good, God-fearing Jews and some Gentiles would all from surrounding areas, they would all converge into the city of Jerusalem. And they would do so for two reasons during Passover week. Number one, they wanted to celebrate the historical event of the Exodus. You get that? That was their liberation from Egyptian slavery some 1,500 years prior. So they've been celebrating this Passover for 1,500 years. They would always go to Jerusalem to do so. But the second thing they were doing is during Passover week, as they were offering a sacrificial animal, a sacrificial lamb to atone for to cover their sins of their family. So every Jewish family would do this. Even some Gentiles got on that and would do this. And so they would do this. And all of this started all the way back in the book of Exodus, the second book of the Bible. I won't take time to unpack it fully, but if you remember that Moses goes to Pharaoh, the Jews had been in slavery under Pharaoh's thumb for so many years. And God says, Moses, you go and tell them, let my people go. And there's a standoff. And finally, 10 plagues. And the very last plague, the one that crippled Pharaoh and humbled Pharaoh was when the death angel visited the whole region, the whole country. And here's what the instructions that God gave Moses said, tell everybody, if they will take an animal, if they will take a lamb and they will slaughter that lamb, and they will take the blood of that animal and apply that blood to the doorpost of their home. If you'll strike the header and the two doorposts, making the sign of a cross, if you'll do that, then when the death angel comes to visit and sees the blood, it will pass over them and the firstborn will not die. So that's where Passover began. And so they've been celebrating this and slaughtering animals all this time. And I know for us, in our understanding of where we are right today, the thought of animal sacrifice just seems absolutely senseless and barbaric, doesn't it? I get that. But please understand, God is so brilliant to give us a physical illustration like this. You know what animal sacrifice, you know what it teaches us? Number one, it teaches us that sin is a big deal. Now, if I asked you, and said, especially in church, and said, hey, do you think sin's a big deal? You know the answer to that. You know the Sunday school answer to that is, yes, it's a big deal. No, it's a big deal. Sin causes death. The proper response to sin is death. Wherever sin is, death follows. The penalty for sin is death. All throughout the Old Testament, it keeps on saying, without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sins. You get that? So it teaches us that sin is a big deal. And wherever there is sin, something or someone must die. But you know what animal sacrifice lets us know? It lets us know that an innocent third party can actually take the place of the guilty. So they were instructed to take a young lamb, and not just any lamb, the best one, a pure one with no deformities, one that's pure and clean and spotless. Find the perfect lamb to represent you and your household. And I want you to slaughter it during Passover week to make atonement for the sins. And on and on and on. This has gone on for 1,500 years, along with the promise that one of these days, a deliverer is going to come and take care of this sin thing for us once and for all. So they've been doing this for a long time. And it's Passover week, and the city is absolutely overflowing with people. You get that? I mean, nobody misses Passover week. Everybody comes. As a matter of fact, the Christian historian Josephus, first century Josephus, actually chronicles the fact that just a few years after after the first Passion Week, there was a census that was taken. And during that year of Passover, he records that over 250,000 lambs were slaughtered during that Passover week. Now, because Jewish law says that one lamb can cover and be a sacrifice for up to 10 family members, it could be that there was over 2.5 million people in the city walls of Jerusalem during that Passion Week. Now, that's a lot. Jerusalem's not that big of a city, and it's walled. It's not like, it's walled, so everybody's inside there. So it is wall to wall, shoulder to shoulder, people to people kind of a deal. It's like this. It's like if we would take Founders Day weekend, okay? The mob, and you would add South by Southwest, the mob. And to that, you would add ACL Fest, the mob. You would take all three of those times 10. Now you got Passover week here in Jerusalem. So here's the deal. Jesus actually chooses this particular day and this particular week to go public. He's doing this on purpose. It's no more, let's keep this between you and I. No, he's putting the spotlight on himself. There's no more guessing, anything like this. He goes publicly and purposefully right now. In his sovereignty, he orchestrates every detail of his own coronation as King of the Jews and the Gentiles, the King of all kings. So listen, he's the one who decided this is the day I'm going to go public. He's the one who instructed the disciples to go into the village and find a colt that's tied and bring it to him. As a matter of fact, he does so, and he chooses to ride on that young colt and go into Jerusalem on that Sunday, the Sunday of Passover week, which happens to be the 10th day of the Jewish month of Nisan. Do you know what all the Jewish families would always do every year on the 10th day of the Jewish month of Nisan? They would choose the lamb that was going to be their Passover sacrifice as a family. So Jesus chooses this particular day of the year to do this. You can connect the dots, and you can choose to say coincidence, but you can't ignore providence. And so he's the one that orchestrates this. He's the one that decided to ride into the city and enter the city on the east side. Most kings and most dignitaries would always choose to come into the west side, and they would always choose to do so in a very prominent way. He chose to come in on the east side, and he chose to come in lots of gates to get into the city. He chose to come in what's called the sheep gate. It's the one gate that all Jewish families were asked to bring your sacrificial lamb through this gate, and he chooses to go through this way. Again, connect the dots. And we can always say that just sounds like a coinky-dink, but I'm telling you, it's absolute providence, and he's in control. He's the one who actually caused people to cry out and say, Hosanna, Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. He wanted verbal confession that you understand who I am. So nobody throughout history could ever truthfully say we didn't have enough information about who he was. He's the one who set all this in motion and created the commotion inside the temple courts. So the Jewish leaders, the Jewish religious leaders, and the Roman leaders would have to ask, what are we going to do about this guy? He's the one that set all this. He was in charge the whole time. He was never a victim. Circumstances did not get out of his control and something happened that he didn't have planned. That is not true. Jesus orchestrated every detail in order to redeem me, in order to redeem you, in order to do for us what we needed to have happen that we cannot do on our own. Do we get this? It was all done on purpose. It was all done for a purpose. As a matter of fact, in one of the other gospels, I think it's the Gospel of Luke, as it goes on, it actually talks about Jesus going into the temple courts and overturning the tables of the money changers, the people that were actually extorting people and saying, okay, how much money do you have? Okay, well, is that all the money that you have? That's exactly the price, for the exchange rate for your lamb. And so things had gotten so out of control. Remember, he marches in there and says, my temple is supposed to be a place of prayer for all the nations. You've turned it into a mall, into a marketplace. You're using it for your own gain and your own purposes. And he starts flipping tables, and he starts kicking open the doors and letting the sacrificial animals out. And you know why that's such a good thing? You know what one of the things he was saying there is that no sacrifices this week. No animal sacrifices are needed because I am the one and once and for all sacrifice for the sins of all of mankind. After this week, no sacrifices need to be made anymore. I'm taking care of it all. Here's something else I want you to notice. Jesus didn't just go public, and he just didn't announce his coronation and his kingship, but he actually, in doing so, he actually fulfills prophecy. You get this? So you remember at the beginning of our text, Matthew chapter 21, when Jesus has two disciples go in and fetch him a young donkey. It says in verse number 4 of our text, it says, this took place to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet. Well, what prophet is that? It's actually the prophet Zechariah. It's in your Old Testament, the second to last book of your Old Testament. Here's what Zechariah said, okay? Again, this sounds really weird. This is like no other kind of kingly coronation that I've ever seen. But this action of him actually riding a young colt, a young donkey, was predicted and prophesied about over 500 years prior. You get this? Because Zechariah actually wrote this. Zechariah 9:9, he wrote this almost 550 years before it actually happened. He says this, rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Now, Zion's another name for the city of Jerusalem. And when you talk about a daughter of Zion or a daughter of Jerusalem, you're talking about all the inhabitants. He's really talking about the world. Rejoice, O daughter of Zion, shout aloud, daughter of Israel. Behold, your king is coming to you. And then he begins to describe the king. Now, check this out. He says, righteous. Nobody else, no other king in history could ever make that claim. Righteous. That means the right one. The one who is in perfect right and righteous standing with the Father. The one with no spot, no blemish, no sin in his track record. Perfect. The one and the only that is right and can make us right. It says righteous, and it says having salvation is he. Nobody else could claim that he's come to save. And they didn't understand what salvation actually meant. They thought it meant this, and Jesus meant this. We'll get to that in a second. And then he says, he continues to describe this king, humble. And it says, and mounted on a donkey, on a colt. It says the foal of a donkey. Do you know that kings rode horses during times of war? They very often would ride donkeys during times of peace. So Jesus here, here's what he's saying. He's saying, I'm coming as a king and I'm completely in charge, but I'm not the kind of king that you're looking for. Not fully and not yet. He's also saying, as he's riding in on a donkey through the sheep gate, he's saying, the statement that I'm making is not a political statement, and the movement that I'm initiating is not a military movement. I know you want it to be a political statement. You want it to be a military movement. It's not yet, not right now. So everybody who had paid attention to history, everybody in the crowd that had paid attention to their Old Testament, they would see Jesus they would listen to what people were chanting as Jesus was riding in. They would see him on the donkey. They would see him go through the sheep gate, and they were connecting the dots. And there were two different responses to what was happening. Everybody could see this, but it filled faithful believers with hope. And it filled pious pretenders with rage. You get that? Listen, when you encounter Jesus, your response to him all depends on the hardness or the softness of your heart. Did we get that? So this is actually the bookend of a 550-year-old prophecy. And finally, here's the last thing I want us to understand, okay? Is that Jesus is actually recognized by the crowd and accepted by the crowd as the king. But look at me. Just temporarily. Just temporarily. It didn't last. See, as Jesus was approaching the city of Jerusalem from the east side, He went through Perea and people started gathering around him and following him. Then he went through Jericho and the crowd got bigger. And he goes through Bethany and he goes through the Mount of Olives, and the entourage around him, it starts off with just being a handful, and then it gets to dozens, then it gets to hundreds. And he's approaching the city on the eastern side. And he's moving slowly. And so people are coming back and forth from the city. And word gets out in the city of Jerusalem about Jesus coming and riding on a donkey. And people start coming out, and the people come out of Jerusalem, a larger crowd than the people that are already following him. And so he's got followers in the rear, and he's got followers up in front, and they all gather around here. And it says most of them took off their outer cloaks, their outer garments, and began to lay them in the road. That was an action saying, you are the authority, and I am submissive to you. So they're recognizing him as the authority of their life. And some that couldn't afford to do that, they would grab branches, palm trees, just all over the place there. We think that probably palm branches, which is actually really a sign of royalty when you would put branches, especially palm branches, in front of somebody to ride over or to walk over. And so the crowd is acknowledging, you are our sovereign. You are our authority. You are our king. They're saying, we are all in. And they begin to shout, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is he who comes in the name of. Those are direct quotes from Psalm chapter 118, which by the way is a messianic psalm. And so they understood this, and they were saying, we acknowledge you as the one who was promised long, long ago. And you've come to fulfill the role and deliver us, to rescue us, to save us. Matter of fact, when they were saying Hosanna, Hosanna literally means save us or rescue us now, deliver us now. So they're chanting this and they're calling for this. And so they're doing this. Here's the deal. They were all in with their version of who they thought Jesus should be. Do you get that? In just a few days, they would all be disappointed because they wanted physical deliverance from Rome. And he knew that the greater need that they had was deliverance from their own sin and their own selfishness. They wanted him to make things right, their version of right. But he wanted to make them right with God. They wanted the temporary fix. He wanted the eternal salvation. He didn't come to make war with Rome. He came to make peace between God and man. He came offering peace, and he still does, and he offers us peace. But we have to accept him as he is, not as you want him to be. Does that make sense? I want you to ask yourself a question. Have you ever been disappointed with Jesus? I want you to honestly ask yourself, have you ever been disappointed with Jesus? If you've never been disappointed with Jesus, you haven't followed him closely enough or long enough. And so, church family, brothers and sisters, I would just ask you to do this. Follow Jesus, and follow Jesus closely enough and long enough to where he disappoints you. And then keep following. Because I'm telling you, all of the followers were disappointed, especially the 12, especially his disciples, especially the apostles, because they said, this is what it's going to look like. And they didn't have in their minds what Jesus had in his mind. You get that? And so as you follow Jesus, you're going to go, surely this is what Jesus would do. Surely Jesus would take care of this situation. Surely Jesus would get me a job. Surely Jesus would provide for this. Surely Jesus would heal my kid. Surely Jesus would do it this way. And you got to hold on and you got to trust long enough and close enough to be disappointed with Jesus. And if you don't bail, if you keep on following, if you keep trusting, there'll be that time where you go, oh, so that's what he was doing. Oh, that's what his intentions were. Oh, get that? Now this whole thing, the beginning of Passion Week, and him riding a donkey, a beast of burden, in through the sheep gate, a sacrifice for the sins of humanity, wrongly accused, mistreated, crucified. What kind of a coronation is that? Not a good coronation. But that's not Jesus' only coronation. There will come a day when there'll be another kind of coronation. Listen to this. I'm going to read Jesus' last and final coronation as king that's still future tense out of Revelation chapter 5. We should do a series through Revelation sometime, okay? Listen to this, Revelation chapter 5. Listen to what this coronation, this future coronation is going to be like. Check this out. And he went and he took the scroll from the right hand of him who was seated on the throne. And when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each holding a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song, saying, "Worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals. For you were slain, and by your blood you ransomed people for God from every tribe and every language, every people and every nation. And you have made them a kingdom and priests to our God, and they shall reign on the earth." And then I looked, and I heard around the throne the living creatures and the elders, the voice of many angels numbering myriads of myriads and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, "Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing." And I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea and all that is in them saying, "To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and might forever and ever." Now that's a coronation, isn't it? That's what's coming up. That's what we have to look forward to. And so as we go through this week of Passion Week, let's evaluate our hearts. And let's prepare ourselves to worship in spirit and in truth next weekend when we come and we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus on Easter weekend. Now we're going to sing. We're going to sing a final song of worship together. And I don't want you to go anywhere because I'm going to come back after the song and I've got an announcement to make to our people, all right? Let's stand together.